Did Buckingham Palace or Prince William set a trap for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and were they gullible enough to fall into it?
He's had enough. He wants to clean the monarchy, and it's all now in the hands of the courts. Meghan Markle is in full mode panic along with Harry because they both know what they did.
Prince William has drawn a line in the sand. And this time, the conversation isn't about headlines or palace drama. It's about law, tradition, and a question rooted in centuries-old constitutional language. While the Duchess of Sussex has continued sharing carefully curated moments from her family life. Polished photos, personal milestones, and glimpses behind the scenes, a courtroom thousands of miles away has been grappling with something far less sentimental. No filters, no captions, just legal interpretation.
The stories would come out. So apparently, according to other journalists, we found out that there were a lot of porcupines probably told to the royals and even to Harry when they met her.
At the center of the debate is an inheritance case worth an estimated £157 million, one that has quietly forced British courts to confront how historic legal wording applies to modern family realities. The case, heard in the High Court in Bristol, involves aristocratic trusts drafted decades ago using language from another era. Mark Bathers, the father involved in the case, acknowledged in court that his second son, Henry, was born through a lawful surrogacy arrangement in California in 2016. The legal question isn't about legitimacy or biology. Henry is recognized as his parents' child, but about whether trust language written before 1970 includes children born through surrogacy. The judge, Sir David Matthews, summarized the issue clearly. There is uncertainty as to whether Henry falls within the class of beneficiaries defined by the historic wording. That wording includes the phrase, heirs of the body, a legal term historically used in inheritance law to describe direct biological descendants. This is not scandal. It is legal interpretation. Centuries ago, such phrases were literal and precise because they reflected the only family structures lawmakers understood at the time. Modern reproductive technology was unimaginable when these trusts were drafted. Today, courts must reconcile traditional language with contemporary realities. That tension between historical wording and modern family life is what has captured legal attention. And it is also why the case has sparked renewed online discussion about royal succession language. The British line of succession has historically relied on similarly traditional terminology. The Act of Settlement of 1701 and subsequent legal frameworks use phrases rooted in an era long before modern medicine or assisted reproduction existed. In practice, every royal birth in the line of succession has been formally documented and witnessed according to established protocols. There is no official evidence questioning the legitimacy or status of any current royal children. Palace procedures and constitutional safeguards exist precisely to prevent uncertainty. Still, as legal scholars revisit old inheritance language in cases like the Bathers dispute, online commentators have begun debating how historic wording interacts with modern realities. Legal experts stress an important distinction. Inheritance trusts and royal succession operate under different legal frameworks. One is governed by private trust law. The other is defined by constitutional statutes and established royal protocols. However, both systems originate from centuries-old language that courts occasionally must interpret in a modern context. What the Bristol case illustrates is not controversy, but evolution. The law often moves slowly, and when new realities emerge, courts are tasked with interpreting old words in a new world. The palace has not commented on online speculation, and constitutional scholars emphasize that succession rules remain clear and firmly established. Still, moments like this remind observers of a broader truth. Tradition and modernity sometimes collide in unexpected ways. And when they do, it is not tabloids or social media that decide the outcome. It is the law. To be clear, there is no official evidence that the Sussex children were born outside established legal requirements. Their births were registered according to UK law, and they remain in the line of succession. However, What drew attention from some royal observers was not legality, but a visible shift away from long-standing public tradition, and that's where the conversation began to gather momentum. This isn't about jumping on internet rumors or indulging in hostility. It's about how institutions rooted in ritual evolve in a modern media age. When Meghan sat down with Oprah Winfrey, she spoke about authenticity, privacy, and reclaiming control over her family narrative. At the same time, media outlets have reported receiving legal warnings or pushback when speculation about pregnancy or personal medical details crossed into intrusive territory. That is not unusual. Public figures routinely defend privacy and challenge reporting they consider misleading. Still, critics argue that such responses can appear tightly managed, more like brand protection than openness, particularly when layered over royal expectations of transparency. Importantly, the questions that circulate online are not about conspiracy, but procedure. In a constitutional monarchy built on hereditary succession, clarity surrounding births has historically been treated as a matter of public record. When Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, welcomed their children, the births followed a highly visible pattern. The hospital steps photo call, formal notices displayed at Buckingham Palace, and immediate confirmation from royal physicians. These rituals were not merely ceremonial. They served to reinforce constitutional legitimacy and public trust. Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born at Portland Hospital in London on May 6, 2019. His birth was officially registered, and palace statements confirmed the details. However, the communications surrounding his arrival were more private than in previous royal births. There was no traditional hospital steps appearance, and the palace's framed notice, historically displayed on an easel outside Buckingham Palace, was replaced with digital announcements and updated press releases. Prince Harry later wrote in Spare that he and Meghan left the hospital relatively quickly and returned to Frogmore Cottage before broader public updates were finalized. For royal watchers accustomed to a slower, more ceremonial timeline, the pace and privacy marked a noticeable departure. Different does not mean improper, but when centuries-old rituals shift, people notice. Royal birth traditions were never about spectacle alone. For generations, they were structured around visibility. Witnesses, formal signatures, official notices. These practices evolved to prevent disputes and ensure continuity within a hereditary system shaped by the Act of Settlement of 1701. Today, modern privacy expectations and media pressures have transformed how royal events are handled. Digital communication has replaced physical notice boards. Security concerns influence public appearances, and younger royals have signaled a desire for greater control over personal milestones. Prince Harry's description of Archie's birth in Spare reflected that shift. He wrote about a calm, intimate atmosphere, electric candles instead of harsh hospital lighting, framed photographs, and quiet rituals meant to welcome the baby into the world. The tone felt deeply personal, even spiritual. For some readers, the account humanized the experience. For others, it underscored the contrast with traditional royal formality. One commentator joked that previous generations issued formal bulletins, while Harry offered sensory details and reflective moments. The remark lingered because it captured the broader change people perceived, a move from institutional ritual toward personal narrative. And that, more than any single decision, is what fueled the conversation. When long-standing traditions evolve, observers naturally compare past and present, not because change implies wrongdoing, but because continuity has long been central to the monarchy's stability. In an era shaped by privacy rights, modern media, and shifting cultural expectations, the balance between tradition and personal autonomy is still being negotiated. And whenever that balance shifts, people pay attention. When Lilibet Lily Mountbatten Windsor was born in June 2021 at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, the spotlight intensified all over again. In Spare, Prince Harry described the moment vividly. "I slid my hands under the tiny back and neck. I pulled our precious daughter from that world into this." If events unfolded that way, it paints a tender, unforgettable scene. No one criticizes a father wanting to be hands-on in the birth of his child. That instinct is human, grounding, and deeply relatable. But beyond the emotion, the constitutional conversation quickly resurfaced. Historically, senior royal births involved formal notifications, medical sign-offs, and visible confirmation. Procedures intended to reinforce legitimacy and continuity. With both Archie and Lilibet, announcements followed modern privacy standards rather than older ceremonial customs. There were no hospital steps photo calls, no palace bulletins signed by doctors displayed on an easel outside Buckingham Palace as seen in earlier generations. Instead, official statements were distributed through press offices and digital channels. That approach reflects contemporary privacy norms, but it also represents a departure from tradition. And when tradition shifts, the noise level rises. Children positioned 6th and 7th in line to the throne occupy constitutional relevance, even if they are unlikely to inherit the crown. For many observers, clarity rooted in precedent matters, not storytelling, not memoir reflections, simply documentation and transparency. Supporters emphasized that all legal requirements were fulfilled. Critics countered that the communication strategy felt tightly managed and unusually private. That perceived gap is where speculation tends to take root. The underlying tension is straightforward. If nothing is irregular and there is no verified evidence of wrongdoing, why hasn't there been a comprehensive, plain-spoken clarification addressing recurring rumors directly? Not legal warnings, not strategic silence, just a clear procedural explanation. That is the question commentators continue to circle. Reports from royal correspondents suggest Prince William favors consistency between protocol and public presentation. No official statement from him has labeled anything suspicious. However, insiders have long described his preference for maintaining institutional clarity and tradition, particularly where constitutional optics are concerned. His actions reflect a measured tightening of boundaries. Sussex biographies on the official royal website were revised. Titles and roles were carefully contextualized. Distinctions were drawn between private, commercial activity, and institutional identity. These adjustments signal administrative housekeeping rather than drama, yet they underscore how the monarchy manages image, hierarchy, and continuity. This moment is less about scandal and more about an ancient institution adapting to a digital era. When centuries-old monarchy practices collide with California-style privacy and modern media strategy, friction is inevitable, and it plays out loudly in public discourse. One online comment captured the tension bluntly. If you reject the royal system, why continue using the title it granted? The remark spread quickly because it touches a broader perception conflict. Critics argue that criticizing the monarchy in documentaries while retaining royal titles for branding creates mixed messaging. Supporters respond that titles are part of legal identity and heritage, not merely marketing tools. This clash isn't driven solely by tabloids or fringe speculation. It reflects a broader conversation about image, tradition, autonomy, and institutional symbolism in the modern age. At its core, the debate isn't about a single birth announcement. It's about expectations, how an ancient framework of succession intersects with personal privacy, evolving media norms, and the realities of a global audience watching every move. And when expectations and evolution collide, the discussion doesn't fade quietly. It grows louder. That's the energy, direct, unambiguous, and grounded in reality. Now, swing back to the Bathurst case, because that's where discussion stops being chatter and becomes law. Mark Bathurst has been transparent about his son Henry being born through surrogacy. There's no secrecy, no coded language. He is petitioning the court to ensure his child's inheritance rights are protected, a father advocating for his son within the legal system. That deserves respect. But the legal complication is real. Historic trust wording often predates modern reproductive methods and does not automatically address children born via surrogacy. This is not scandal. It is the friction between legacy drafting and modern family structures. High Court Judge David Matthews stated plainly that uncertainty exists under the current wording. That uncertainty means Bathurst must formally petition the court to clarify whether Henry falls within the class of beneficiaries. The law does not update itself automatically. It must be interpreted or revised. That is how legacy trusts function when their language was written generations ago. This is where broader questions begin to surface. Private trusts can be amended through legal channels. Constitutional instruments, however, such as the Act of Settlement 1701 and the Succession to the Crown Act 2013, are not family documents subject to quiet revision. They form part of the constitutional framework governing the monarchy. So when observers see ambiguity in a £157 million inheritance case rooted in historic wording, some begin asking how similar phrasing might operate at the highest constitutional level. To be absolutely clear, there is no official evidence that Archie or Lilibet were born via surrogacy, and no court has questioned their status in the line of succession. Their positions remain officially recognized. Legal scholars note that if a hypothetical constitutional question ever arose, it would not be settled by media speculation or online debate. Parliament, not public commentary, would interpret any constitutional implications. That is how constitutional law functions. Some commentators have revisited past remarks from Samantha Markle, who years ago urged scrutiny of timelines. At the time, those remarks were widely dismissed as family conflict playing out publicly. With the Bathurst case drawing attention to inheritance language, some critics argue her comments are being reframed in a broader legal conversation. This does not constitute proof. It reflects shifting context and renewed public interest. When questions first circulated online, reports indicated the Sussex camp responded through legal channels rather than issuing detailed public procedural explanations. That approach is a strategic choice. Supporters view it as protecting medical privacy and family boundaries. Critics interpret it as limiting transparency. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's memoir Spare shared deeply personal reflections and intimate details about family life. The birth narratives emphasized emotional and spiritual moments rather than procedural specifics. That contrast, personal openness paired with institutional privacy, is one reason debate persists. Ultimately, this discussion is not driven solely by internet speculation. It reflects a broader collision between centuries-old constitutional language and modern realities of family, medicine, privacy, and media expectations. Unless constitutional language is formally challenged or clarified through legal processes, the official status of the Sussex children remains unchanged. But the broader conversation about tradition, transparency, and the evolution of institutions in a modern world is unlikely to fade anytime soon. Some critics argue that, despite the depth of personal detail shared in Spare, there was never a single clear procedural explanation addressing the surrogacy rumors head-on. To them, a memoir that explored grief, trauma, therapy, and intimate family moments seemed to leave out the specific institutional details some observers continue to question. One widely shared online comment summed up that frustration. Harry will write about everything except the things people think actually matter. That sentiment spread quickly because it captures a broader tension among certain royal watchers. For some, the issue is not proof or accusation. It is the absence of procedural clarity in an institution historically built on documentation and visibility. This is where the focus shifts to Prince William. He did not create the storm, but he will inherit the institution navigating it. Observers often describe his approach as structural rather than emotional, reinforcing protocol, tightening messaging, and emphasizing continuity. There are no confessional interviews, no memoirs, no public airing of grievances, only deliberate positioning and institutional steadiness. The contrast frequently highlighted is one of optics. Mark Bathurst addressed his inheritance question through open court filings and judicial interpretation, transparency expressed in legal language. By comparison, when questions circulate around Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, responses have largely come through legal representatives, privacy protections, and formal communications rather than detailed public procedural explanations. Supporters view this as a reasonable effort to protect medical privacy and family boundaries. Critics frame it as controlled messaging or damage limitation. The facts remain the same. Interpretation differs. For longtime royal followers, Those who watched Diana, Princess of Wales, capture global sympathy, who mourned her loss, and who later celebrated the marriage of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. The monarchy represents continuity rather than celebrity. To them, this conversation is not tabloid drama, but institutional legacy. The British monarchy has survived abdication crises, divorces, scandals, and deeply personal revelations. It has endured both public heartbreak and private turmoil. What its defenders often emphasize, however, is the importance of clarity around succession, not because controversy exists, but because certainty sustains confidence in a constitutional system. To be precise, the Sussex children remain officially recognized in the line of succession. No court ruling challenges their status. There is no legal proceeding questioning their legitimacy. Yet, public debate persists, and perception, fair or not, plays a role in how institutions are viewed. In an era where tradition meets modern privacy expectations, even procedural differences can become focal points for wider cultural conversations. For those who have followed this story from the beginning, each legal development and historical comparison adds another layer to the discussion. Context matters. The next phase of analysis will connect pieces that are rarely examined side by side, and understanding the full picture requires looking beyond headlines to the structures beneath them.